"This ghetto trash doesn't deserve to fly," Gate Agent Beth Wilson hissed, striking the match. The flame shot toward Maya Chen's passport. Beth's thick fingers gripped the burgundy document over a metal wastebasket. Her eyes locked on Maya's face, savoring every second of shock. Maya's breath caught. Passengers whipped out phones. Beth swept Maya's boarding pass off the counter with her forearm. The paper fluttered to the dirty floor near Maya's worn sneakers. "Pick it up, honey. On your knees." The match flame kissed the passport's corner. Gold lettering began to bubble and blacken. Smoke curled upward. "Stop filming!" Beth barked at recording passengers. "This fraud doesn't need witnesses." Maya's messenger bag slipped from her shoulder. Her government ID wallet remained hidden inside. Have you ever been humiliated so completely that someone literally tried to burn your identity while crowds watched? The passport corner erupted in orange flame. Beth's grin widened as she watched the federal seal melt into black ash. "There we go," she cooed, dropping the burning document into the metal wastebasket. Problem solved. Maya stared at her identity dissolving. The burgundy cover curled and crackled. Her photo warped in the heat, features disappearing behind bubbling plastic. "You just destroyed a federal document," Maya said quietly. "I destroyed a fake." Beth crossed her arms, satisfaction radiating from every pore. "That's what we do to trash in first class." Teenage passenger Sarah Carter held up her phone, live streaming to 50,000 viewers. Comments exploded across her screen. "OMGSHEACTUALLYBURNEDIT and CALTHFBENOW. The digital boarding display blinked. Flight 447, boarding 8 minutes remaining. Maya's government phone buzzed against her hip. The caller ID read, "DC Director Urgent." She let it ring. Smoke from the wastebasket triggered overhead sensors. A maintenance worker approached with a fire extinguisher, but Beth waved him off. "Just document disposal, nothing to worry about." Business traveler Marcus Webb live streamed from gate seating. His TikTok caption read, "Racist gate agent burns woman's passport at O'Hare." Within minutes, the hashtag passport burning started trending. Maya knelt to retrieve her boarding pass from the floor. The paper was scuffed with dirty shoe prints. "Stay down there," Beth commanded. "It suits you better." Passengers gasped. Several started recording specifically at that moment. Maya stood slowly, boarding pass in hand. Her first-class ticket showed a subtle federal priority stamp in the corner. Her messenger bag contained an FAA inspector badge, still hidden from view. "Ma'am, I need to board this flight," Maya said, voice level. "Not with burned documents, you don't." Beth poked at the smoldering passport remains with a pen. "Look at this mess. Cheap foreign printing always burns fast." The passport pages had separated, revealing Maya's entry stamps from dozens of countries. Official visas curled into ash. Years of legitimate travel history reduced to carbon. "I can verify my identity through the system," Maya offered. "System's down," Beth lied smoothly. "Besides, people who carry fake documents probably have fake IDs, too." "What's next? A counterfeit driver's license." Maya's phone buzzed again. This time, Federal Marshal's office. Airport security officer Mike Torres arrived, drawn by the smoke and growing crowd. He saw the burned passport remains and immediately assumed Maya was the problem. "What's the situation here?" he asked Beth. "Fraudulent documents, already disposed of properly." Beth gestured to the smoldering wastebasket. "This woman was attempting to board with obvious fake identification." Mike examined the ashes. "Ma'am, did you bring fake documents to the airport?" "Those were legitimate federal documents," Maya replied. "Sure, they were," Beth snorted. "That's why they burn so easily. Real passports don't just catch fire like paper napkins." Other passengers began taking sides. A woman in pearls nodded approvingly at Beth. "Good catch. These scammers are getting bold." But younger passengers live streamed with outrage. Sarah's viewer count hit 180,000. Comments demanded federal investigation. Maya's messenger bag shifted, revealing a small chain attached to an official badge. She adjusted the strap quickly, keeping the credential hidden. Supervisor Janet Phillips arrived, alerted by passenger complaints about smoke. She surveyed the scene. Burned document remains, security presence, recording passengers, and Maya standing calmly amid the chaos. "Beth, what happened here?" "Fraud attempt. Documents destroyed per protocol." Beth's chest puffed with pride. "I protected our airline from criminal activity." Janet examined the ash-filled wastebasket. Pieces of Maya's passport photo were still recognizable, though charred beyond use. "Ma'am," Janet addressed Maya with barely concealed disdain. "Attempting to board with fraudulent documents is a federal crime. We'll need to detain you pending investigation." Maya's phone rang again. The display showed FAA emergency line. "I need to take this call," Maya said. "You need to cooperate with our security procedures," Janet replied. "Criminals don't get phone privileges." The boarding display updated. Flight 447, boarding, 2 minutes remaining. Maya watched her federal identification continue burning. The gold eagle emblem on the passport cover had completely melted. Her diplomatic immunity page was indistinguishable from the surrounding ash. More security officers arrived. The gate area filled with uniforms, all assuming Maya was the threat, rather than the victim of document destruction. Beth basked in the attention. "It's always the quiet ones who try the biggest scams," she announced to the gathering of passengers. "Good thing I have experience spotting fakes." Maya's federal credentials remained hidden in her bag. Her first-class boarding pass showed priority status that Beth had dismissed as fraudulent. Her government-issued phone continued buzzing with urgent federal calls that she couldn't answer under current circumstances. The passport fire had died to glowing embers, but smoke still rose from the metal wastebasket. Maya's identity existed now only as evidence of a federal crime that everyone except her believed she had committed. Gate manager Tom Baker rushed over, following the acrid smell of burning documents. He surveyed the scene, smoldering wastebasket, security officers, and growing crowd of recording passengers. "What the hell is burning at my gate?" he demanded. "Fraudulent documents," Janet reported efficiently. "Beth caught this woman attempting to board with fake identification. Evidence has been properly disposed of." Tom peered into the wastebasket. Maya's passport photo stared back from the ashes. Half her face melted away. The gold federal seal had pooled into metallic droplets on the metal bottom. "Ma'am, you brought fake documents to a federal facility," he told Maya. "That's a serious crime." Maya's phone vibrated against her hip. Homeland Security priority flashed on the screen. She reached for it. "Don't touch that phone," Security Officer Mike commanded. "Suspects don't get to make calls until we sort this out." Sarah's live stream had exploded to 485,000 viewers. Her phone screen couldn't keep up with the flooding comments. "Document destruction is a federal crime, and she's destroying evidence." The boarding display clicked down. Flight 447, boarding 6 minutes remaining. Additional security officers arrived, forming a loose circle around Maya. She remained seated, hands visible, but her messenger bag's strap had shifted again. The small chain with the official badge was more visible now. "Look at her acting all calm," Beth announced to the gathering crowd. "Classic criminal behavior. They think if they don't react, we'll believe their lies." Business traveler Marcus had switched from TikTok to Facebook Live, streaming to his professional network. "This is insane. The airport employee just burned someone's passport because she assumed it was fake." But other passengers supported Beth. An elderly man nodded approvingly. "Good for her. These fraudsters need to be stopped." Tom examined the burned passport remains more closely. Among the ashes, he spotted fragments of official seals and watermarks that looked surprisingly sophisticated for supposed fakes. "These seem pretty detailed for counterfeit documents," he muttered. Beth's confidence wavered slightly. "High-quality fakes. That's how they fool people." Maya's government phone rang again. The ringtone was different, a priority alert tone that made several passengers look up. "That's a government phone," observed a woman in military fatigues. "Those have special tones. Criminals steal government phones too," Beth countered quickly, probably part of her whole fraud scheme. Flight attendant coordinator Lisa Park arrived with the flight crew. Captain James Morrison examined the situation with professional concern. "We have smoke at the gate and security involvement," Morrison said. "What's the reason for our delay?" "Document fraud investigation," Tom replied. "Passenger attempted to board with burned fake identification." "Burned?" Morrison looked puzzled. "Why would fake documents be burned?" "Because they were obviously fake," Beth insisted. "Real documents don't burn like that," Maya finally spoke. "Sir, all paper documents burn when exposed to flame. Material composition doesn't prevent combustion." Morrison studied Maya more closely. Her calm, precise language struck him as unusually professional for someone caught in document fraud. The boarding display updated again. Flight 447, boarding, 2 minutes remaining. Maya's phone showed 19 missed calls from federal numbers. Her bag had shifted further, revealing more of the official badge chain. The FAA inspector credential was almost visible. "Ma'am, what's that badge in your bag?" asked Security Officer Jennifer Walsh. Maya glanced down. "Personal identification. More fake IDs," Beth declared triumphantly. "I bet she has a whole collection of fraudulent documents." Tom reached for Maya's bag. "We'll need to examine all identification. I'd prefer to handle my credentials myself," Maya said quietly. "Criminals don't get preferences," Janet snapped. "You lost your rights when you brought fake documents to federal property." The live stream audience had grown to over 750,000 across multiple platforms. Hashtags, hashtag passport burning, and hashtag airport racism dominated trending topics. Comments demanded federal investigation and employee termination. Captain Morrison's radio crackled. "Flight 447, this is a tower. We're showing extended ground delay at your gate. Roger, tower. Document investigation in progress." Maya watched more ash from her passport flutter in the air conditioning breeze. Her diplomatic visa page had been reduced to black flakes scattered across the gate floor. Years of legitimate international travel history literally blown away. "This is taking too long," complained a first-class passenger. "Can't we just remove her and board?" "Federal protocol requires full investigation," Tom explained. "Document fraud is serious business." Maya's messenger bag had shifted completely now. The FAA inspector badge was clearly visible to anyone looking closely, but the security officers and gate staff were focused on her face, not her credentials. Beth poked at the passport ashes again with her pen. "Look how completely it burned. Cheap foreign materials, probably made in someone's basement." Airport police officer Derek Carter arrived, drawn by the crowd and smoke reports. He examined the burned document remains with professional interest. "Ma'am, these look like they might have been legitimate documents," he told Maya. "Federal passports have specific burning characteristics due to security features." Beth's face reddened. "I know fake documents when I see them. 15 years of experience." "Experience doesn't change chemistry," Maya replied calmly. "All organic compounds combust at similar temperatures." Officer Carter studied Maya more intently. Her technical language and composed demeanor under stress seemed inconsistent with typical document fraud cases. The boarding display showed Flight 447, boarding 8 minutes remaining. Maya's phone rang with the special federal emergency tone again. This time, several passengers recognized the distinctive sound. "That's definitely a government phone," said the military passenger. "I've heard those tones in federal buildings. Stolen government property," Beth insisted desperately. "Part of her criminal enterprise." Maya's bag had now shifted enough that her FAA credentials were partially visible. The gold eagle emblem caught overhead lighting. Officer Carter noticed the gleam. "Ma'am, what kind of identification do you have in your bag?" he asked professionally. Maya looked directly at him. "Federal Identification Officer." The words hung in the air. Beth's confident smirk began to fade. Tom stepped closer to examine Maya's bag. Janet's eyes narrowed as she processed what Maya had just claimed. Captain Morrison moved forward. "What kind of federal identification?" Maya reached slowly for her messenger bag as hundreds of passengers recorded, and over 1.2 million people watched online, waiting to see what credentials would emerge from the bag of the woman whose passport had just been burned to ash. Maya reached into her messenger bag with deliberate calm. She withdrew a leather credential wallet and placed it on the counter next to the smoldering passport remains. The gold FAA Eagle emblem caught the overhead lights. She opened the wallet slowly. Inside, her federal identification gleamed. Maya Chen, Chief Inspector, Federal Aviation Administration, Criminal Enforcement Division. Silence crashed over Gate A7. Beth's pen clattered to the floor. Her face drained of color as she read the badge over and over as if the letters might rearrange themselves into something less devastating. That's not possible," she whispered. Maya placed her Department of Transportation Enforcement authorization next to the credentials. The official seal was identical to the one that had just melted into metallic droplets in the wastebasket. "Chief Inspector Maya Chen, FAA Criminal Investigation Unit," she said quietly. "Badge number 4782. Federal Law Enforcement Authority under Title 49 U.S.C. Section 44701. Tom's hands trembled as he examined the credentials. The holographic security features were unmistakable. The federal authority signatures were authentic. The enforcement powers listed were extensive. "You're a federal agent," he breathed. "Chief Inspector," Maya corrected. "And you just watched your employee destroy federal identification during an active undercover investigation." Janet grabbed the credentials with shaking hands, desperate to find some flaw. But the Department of Transportation letterhead was genuine. The federal prosecutor liaison contact information was real. Maya's photo started back from official government plastic. "This has to be fake, too," Janet said desperately. "More fraudulent documents." Maya pulled out her tablet and accessed the federal database. "Would you like to verify my credentials through the Federal Law Enforcement Officer Safety Act database? My commission number is FA 782922024. Officer Carter stepped forward, recognizing Federal Law Enforcement Authority. "Ma'am, I deeply apologize for any misunderstanding. You followed protocol, officer," Maya interrupted. Miss Wilson, however, committed multiple federal crimes on live stream video witnessed by over 1.2 million people. Beth stared at the burned passport remains she had created, the federal seal she had melted, the government property she had destroyed while the world watched online. "I didn't know," she stammered. "It looked fake. The quality seemed wrong." Maya pulled out her official notebook and began writing with precise strokes. "Miss Wilson, employee badge 4471, deliberately destroyed federal identification at 8:15 a.m. Central Time. Physical evidence. Passport ashes in metal wastebasket. Witnesses present. Approximately 200 passengers. Multiple live stream audience exceeding 1,2 million viewers across TikTok, Facebook, Instagram platforms." Captain Morrison studied Maya's credentials with growing professional respect and dawning horror at the situation. "Chief Inspector, how can we assist your federal investigation?" "You can start by preserving the crime scene evidence." Maya gestured to the wastebasket full of passport ash. "That's now material evidence in a federal criminal prosecution." Sarah's livestream had exploded beyond 800,000 viewers. Comments flooded in faster than her phone could display. "Holy shit, she's FBI. She burned a federal agent's passport. Federal crime on live television." Maya's phone rang with the distinctive federal emergency tone. This time she answered without hesitation. "Chen here. Yes, the operation is proceeding exactly as planned. Document destruction occurred as we anticipated. Full evidence collected from multiple digital sources." She paused, listening to the voice on the other end. "Understood, Director." Federal response team dispatched. ETA 8 minutes. Tom's face went pale as the implications crashed over him. Federal response team. Maya continued her call, speaking with calm authority that contrasted sharply with the chaos around her. Approximately 200 direct witnesses. Over 1.2 million remote viewers via social media platforms. Complete video documentation from 17 different angles. Chain of custody established. Another pause. "Yes, sir. Textbook federal crime captured in real time with maximum evidentiary value." Beth sank into a nearby chair, the weight of her actions finally hitting her. "This was supposed to be fake," she whispered to herself, staring at the ash-covered wastebasket. The document looked so suspicious. It had to be fake. "Miss Wilson," Maya said, ending her call. "Legitimate federal documents look exactly like legitimate federal documents because they are legitimate federal documents. There is no visual difference between my passport and any other valid U.S. passport issued by the State Department." Janet frantically tried to distance the airline from Beth's criminal actions. "Chief Inspector, please understand this was not authorized by management. This was completely unauthorized individual employee misconduct." Maya knelt and carefully collected ash fragments from around the wastebasket, placing them in evidence bags. Federal law under 18 U.S.C. Section 1361 doesn't distinguish between authorized and unauthorized destruction of government property. The crime occurred regardless of corporate approval or knowledge. She pulled out her tablet and began systematically documenting the scene. High-resolution photographs of the passport ash scattered across the gate floor. Video recordings of the federal seal melted into metallic droplets in the wastebasket. Screenshots of the hundreds of phone recordings capturing the entire incident from every conceivable angle. Under 18 U.S.C. Section 1361, willful destruction of government property carries a maximum penalty of 10 years in federal prison and fines up to $300,000. Maya announced to the gathering crowd of passengers, airline staff, and security personnel. Beth's confident demeanor had completely collapsed. 10 years in federal prison? When the destruction specifically targets federal law enforcement identification during an active criminal investigation, federal sentencing guidelines recommend the maximum penalty, Maya explained with clinical precision. Additional charges under 18 U.S.C. Section 1505 for obstruction of federal proceedings carry up to 5 years each. Airport security officers began recognizing the full scope of what had occurred. A federal law enforcement agent's identity documents had been deliberately destroyed by an airline employee in front of hundreds of witnesses and broadcast live to over 1 million online. Chief Inspector, Officer Carter asked respectfully, "What kind of federal investigation were you conducting here?" Maya closed her tablet and looked directly at him. Systematic discrimination patterns in airline customer service operations, specifically document challenges and identity verification procedures based on passenger appearance rather than legitimate security protocols. The devastating irony settled over everyone present. Beth's racially motivated assumptions about Maya's appearance had led her to destroy the very federal agent's documents who was conducting an undercover investigation into exactly that kind of discrimination. Tom examined Maya's credentials one final time, desperately hoping somehow they might be elaborate counterfeits. But the federal authentication features were undeniable. The holographic seals were genuine government issues. The enforcement authority was devastatingly real. "Miss Wilson will need to be detained immediately pending federal criminal charges," Maya announced with quiet authority. "Destruction of federal property, interference with a federal investigation, obstruction of justice, and potential federal civil rights violations." Beth looked down at the passport ashes scattered around her feet like confetti. Federal document fragments clung to her airline uniform. The evidence of her federal crimes was literally coating her body. Maya's phone rang again. She glanced at the caller ID. U.S. Marshal Service, ETA, 6 minutes. "Your federal arrest team is arriving shortly, Miss Wilson," Maya informed Beth, matter-of-factly. "I strongly recommend you remain calm and cooperative during the detention process." The live stream audiences across multiple platforms watched in stunned fascination as the power dynamic completely and utterly reversed. The woman they had seen systematically humiliated and stripped of her identity was now revealing herself as one of the most powerful federal law enforcement officials in aviation security. Maya bent down and carefully picked up a charred fragment of her passport photo. Half her face was burned away in the official document, but her federal inspector credentials remained completely intact and devastatingly authoritative. The hunter had become the hunted. The victim had become the prosecutor, and every second was captured in high-definition video evidence. Federal marshals arrived in tactical gear, their heavy boots echoing across the terminal. Deputy Marshal Rebecca Santos approached Maya with professional respect. "Chief Inspector Chen, we're here for the federal arrest warrant." Maya nodded toward Beth, who sat frozen in her chair, staring at the passport ashes scattered around her feet. "Miss Wilson, employee badge 4471. Federal document destruction, obstruction of justice, interference with federal investigation." Corporate Vice President Pat Harris burst through the crowd, her $3,000 suit wrinkled from the emergency helicopter flight from headquarters. Behind her, a team of lawyers clutched briefcases and tablets. "What is the extent of our legal exposure?" she demanded of Tom. Maya opened her tablet, displaying federal statutes with clinical precision. Under 18 U.S.C., Section 1361, your employee's willful destruction of federal property carries criminal penalties up to 10 years imprisonment and $300,000 in fines. Corporate liability under vicarious responsibility doctrine could reach $75 million. Pat's face went white. $75 million? That's the criminal exposure, Maya continued calmly. Civil rights violations under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983 carry unlimited damage potential. Federal contract violations could suspend your operating certificates at all 127 airports where you currently hold gates. The airline's legal team frantically typed on tablets, calculating the financial catastrophe. Senior counsel Marcus Webb whispered urgently to Pat, "Our annual revenue is $35 billion. Federal contract suspension would cost us $1.2 billion monthly." Maya pulled up additional data. "Your airline processes 2.3 million passengers monthly through O'Hare alone. Each discrimination incident carries potential damages of $1.8 million under established federal precedent. Miss Wilson's personnel file shows 12 previous complaints for discriminatory document challenges." Tom's hands shook as he realized the scope of corporate knowledge. "We had complaints about her before. 12 documented complaints over 14 months, Maya confirmed, reading from her tablet. All involving passengers of color, all dismissed by management without investigation. This establishes a pattern of deliberate indifference to civil rights violations." Pat grabbed the complaint file from Tom, Her legal team examined the documentation with growing horror. Customer complaints about Beth's behavior toward minority passengers. Incidents of excessive document scrutiny, reports of discriminatory language, all filed away without action. This creates corporate liability under Section 1983, lead counsel whispered. Deliberate indifference to constitutional violations. Federal prosecutors arrived, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney David Kim. Maya briefed him efficiently while Pat and her lawyers watched in panic. Complete video documentation from 19 different sources, Maya reported. Over 1.2 million online viewers witnessed the federal crime in real time. Physical evidence secured in federal custody. 12 prior discrimination complaints establishing corporate knowledge. Prosecutor Kim examined the burned passport evidence. This is prosecutorial gold. Federal crime committed against federal agents during a civil rights investigation, captured on live stream video with corporate knowledge of prior incidents. Pat attempted damage control. We're prepared to cooperate fully with federal authorities. Miss Wilson will be terminated immediately. We'll implement comprehensive anti-discrimination training. Maya looked up from her documentation. Miss Harris, termination doesn't address federal criminal charges. Your employee committed felony destruction of government property. Criminal prosecution proceeds regardless of employment status. The federal marshals placed Beth in restraints. Her airline uniform was covered with ash from Maya's passport, physical evidence of her crime, literally coating her clothing. I didn't know it was real, Beth sobbed as handcuffs clicked into place. It looked fake to me. Ignorance of federal law is not a defense. Prosecutor Kim informed her. Federal crimes carry federal consequences regardless of intent or knowledge. Maya turned to Pat with quiet authority. Your airline faces immediate federal enforcement actions. Operating certificate review begins Monday. All gate operations are subject to federal monitoring pending compliance review. Pat's legal team calculated frantically. Federal monitoring costs average $3.5 million monthly per major hub. Full compliance review takes 18 to 24 months minimum. Our stock price has already dropped 15% since the live stream went viral. CFO Robert Martinez reported via emergency phone call. Federal criminal charges against our employee for burning a federal agent's passport. Market confidence is collapsing. Maya displayed more devastating data. Federal Aviation Regulation Part 129 allows immediate suspension of operating privileges for airlines whose employees commit federal crimes during passenger processing. Your certificate of authorization covers 847 daily flights across 17 states. The mathematical implications hit Pat like physical blows. Daily revenue of $4.2 million per suspended route. Federal fines averaging $180,000 per incident. Legal defense costs projected at $22 million minimum. What do you need from us to minimize federal action? Pat asked desperately. Maya's response was methodical and devastating. Immediate implementation of federal bias monitoring systems at all 127 gates. Approximately $4.8 million. Mandatory federal discrimination training for all 2,847 customer service employees. Cost. $2.7 million annually. Federal compliance officer position reporting directly to the Department of Transportation. Salary and benefits. $420,000 annually. She continued reading from her enforcement authority. Real-time discrimination detection software monitoring all gate interactions. Implementation cost, $7.1 million. Monthly federal audit fees, $270,000. Victim compensation fund for affected passengers, $15 million minimum. Pat's lawyers frantically scribbled numbers. The total federal compliance costs exceeded $35 million in the first year alone. Federal criminal prosecution of Miss Wilson proceeds independently, Maya emphasized. These corporate compliance measures address civil rights violations and federal contract requirements. They do not affect criminal charges. Deputy Marshal Santos read Beth her rights as cameras continued recording. The woman who had confidently burned Maya's passport an hour ago was now being arrested for federal crimes while the world watched. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in federal court. You have the right to a federal public defender. Maya pulled up final enforcement data. Miss Harris, your airline has 72 hours to submit a federal compliance plan to the Department of Transportation. Failure to comply triggers automatic operating certificate suspension under emergency federal authority. The boarding display showed Maya's original flight. Flight 447, delayed pending federal investigation. Pat realized the bitter irony. Maya's investigation had been triggered by exactly this kind of discrimination, and Beth's criminal behavior had provided perfect evidence of systemic problems. "How long will federal monitoring continue?" Pat asked weakly. Maya closed her tablet. "Until the Department of Transportation determines your airline consistently complies with federal anti-discrimination requirements. Based on current violation patterns, minimum 5 years federal oversight." Federal crime scene investigators arrived to collect additional evidence. They photographed this burned passport remains, documented the federal seal melted in the wastebasket, and collected witness statements from the hundreds of passengers who had watched federal document destruction occur in real time. Maya's phone showed 2-3 missed calls from national media outlets. The story was exploding across news networks. Airline employee burns federal agent's passport on live stream. Chief Inspector, Prosecutor Kim asked, "Do you need medical evaluation for the criminal assault?" Maya considered the question. "Document destruction constitutes destruction of my federal identification, which impacts my ability to perform law enforcement duties. I'll need official documentation for the federal case file." Pat realized another devastating implication. Assault on a federal officer carried additional criminal penalties. Beth's actions weren't just property destruction, they were attacks on federal law enforcement authority. The corporate showdown was complete. Maya had systematically documented every aspect of federal liability from individual criminal charges to corporate civil rights violations. The airline faced years of federal oversight, millions in compliance costs and criminal prosecutions that would reshape industry discrimination policies. Maya picked up the final fragments of her burned passport. The document that Beth had destroyed in discriminatory rage was now evidence in a federal case that would transform aviation civil rights enforcement forever. Justice would be measured not in revenge, but in systematic change backed by federal authority and corporate accountability. 3 months later, Federal Courthouse, Chicago, Judge Margaret Carter brought down her gavel with decisive authority. "Miss Wilson, you have pleaded guilty to federal destruction of government property under 18 U.S.C. Section 1361. The court sentences you to 30 months in federal prison followed by 2 years supervised probation." Beth Wilson, wearing orange prison scrubs instead of her airline uniform, nodded through tears. The passport ashes that had once clung to her clothing were now evidence exhibits in federal court. "Your actions," Judge Carter continued, "represent a direct attack on federal law enforcement authority. You destroyed the identification of a federal agent conducting lawful civil rights investigations. This court cannot and will not tolerate such criminal behavior." Maya sat in the gallery watching justice unfold with quiet satisfaction. Her replacement passport lay in her briefcase, identical to the one Beth had burned, but this document would never be destroyed by discriminatory rage. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded Prosecutor Kim. "This conviction sends a clear message," he announced. "Federal agents conducting civil rights investigations will not be targeted with impunity. Criminal destruction of federal property carries real federal consequences." Department of Transportation Headquarters, Washington, D.C. Secretary of Transportation, Maria Rodriguez, signed the landmark Aviation Civil Rights Enhancement Act into law. Maya stood beside her as cameras captured the historic moment. "This legislation requires real-time discrimination monitoring at all commercial aviation facilities," Secretary Rodriguez announced. "AI-powered systems will detect bias in customer service interactions and trigger immediate federal intervention." The new law mandated revolutionary changes across the industry. Every major airport would install advanced monitoring technology within 18 months. Federal bias detection algorithms would analyze gate agent interactions, flagging discriminatory language or behavior for immediate review. Maya had authored the technical specifications. The system monitors voice patterns, body language, and interaction duration, she explained to assembled aviation executives. It identifies statistical deviations that suggest discriminatory treatment. Airlines faced stark choices: comply with federal monitoring or lose operating certificates. The burned passport incident had cost the aviation industry its discriminatory impunity. O'Hare International Airport, Gate A7 renovated. Tom Baker wore a new title, Federal Compliance Director. His office overlooked the gate where Maya's passport had been burned. A permanent memorial plaque read "Dedicated to Equal Treatment Under Law." The gate had been completely restructured. Digital monitors displayed real-time federal discrimination statistics. Customer service representatives wore body cameras connected directly to Department of Transportation servers. Every interaction was recorded, analyzed, and scored for bias indicators. We process 2,847 passenger interactions daily, Tom reported to his federal oversight team. AI monitoring has reduced discrimination complaints by 91% in 3 months. Employee bias training is now mandatory monthly, not annual. Sarah Carter, the teenager whose live stream had captured the passport burning, now worked as a federal student ambassador. Her role involved training young people to document and report discrimination incidents. "My video has been viewed 80 million times," she told a civil rights conference. It proves that bystanders with phones can create accountability even when authorities fail to act. Federal Aviation Administration headquarters. Maya's corner office displayed her burned passport photo in a frame, a reminder of how discrimination could target anyone, even federal agents. Her new title reflected expanded authority, Director Aviation Civil Rights Enforcement Division. Her team had grown from 12 to 47 investigators. Federal funding had increased to $35 million annually, enabling systematic discrimination audits at every major aviation facility. We've documented 1,847 discrimination incidents since the O'Hare passport burning, Maya reported to Congress. Our enforcement actions have resulted in $190 million in federal fines and compliance investments. The burned passport had become a catalyst for industry transformation. Airlines implemented federal monitoring systems, bias training programs, and real-time discrimination reporting mechanisms that Maya's team had designed. Corporate accountability measures. Pat Harris's airline had become a model for federal compliance, not by choice, but by federal mandate. The company's discrimination incidents had dropped to near zero under constant federal surveillance. "We've invested $70 million in bias prevention technology," Pat reported to shareholders. "Federal monitoring costs $4.2 million annually, but our legal liability has been eliminated through systematic compliance." The airline industry had learned a devastating lesson. Discriminatory employees could destroy corporate value overnight. Beth's passport burning had cost the industry hundreds of millions in compliance investments, but had eliminated systematic discrimination that had persisted for decades. Technology solutions implementation. Maya's team had partnered with artificial intelligence companies to develop sophisticated bias detection systems. The technology analyzed thousands of variables in customer service interactions, identifying patterns that human observers might miss. Gate agents now wore devices that monitored vocal stress, interaction duration, and procedural consistency. The technology flagged interactions where minority passengers received different treatment than white passengers with identical documentation. "The system prevents discrimination before it escalates," Maya explained to international aviation officials. "Real-time intervention stops bias at its source rather than addressing consequences after damage is done." Airlines reported that automated bias monitoring had improved customer satisfaction across all demographic groups. When discrimination was eliminated through technology, overall service quality improved for everyone. Legal precedent established. The federal court's conviction of Beth Wilson had established binding precedent for similar cases. Federal agents conducting civil rights investigations now received enhanced legal protection under expanded federal statutes. United States v. Wilson has been cited in 95 subsequent federal cases, legal scholar Professor Jennifer Walsh noted. It established that discrimination against federal agents during investigations constitutes obstruction of justice with enhanced penalties. The burned passport had become evidence in a landmark case that strengthened federal civil rights enforcement across all industries, not just aviation. Victim compensation and community impact. Maya had declined personal compensation for the passport destruction, instead directing funds toward a federal civil rights education program. The $3.5 million Victim Compensation Fund supported bias prevention training in schools and communities. "My passport was burned, but my authority remained intact." Maya addressed a civil rights summit. Individual discrimination incidents can become catalysts for systematic change when properly documented and prosecuted. High school students across the country studied the O'Hare incident in civics classes. Maya's calm professionalism, under extreme discrimination, had become a model for responding to bias through legal channels rather than emotional retaliation. Industry transformation results. Federal statistics show dramatic improvements across aviation customer service. Discrimination complaints had decreased 81% industry-wide within 6 months of the passport burning incident. Airlines reported that federal compliance investments, though initially expensive, had improved operational efficiency. When discriminatory delays were eliminated, overall customer processing became faster and more predictable. The Wilson conviction fundamentally changed aviation culture, noted Transportation Secretary Rodriguez. Fear of federal prosecution has eliminated discriminatory practices that had persisted for decades. International recognition. Maya's case had attracted global attention from civil rights organizations. The European Union had adopted similar bias monitoring requirements for airlines operating in EU airspace. The burned passport incident demonstrated that individual acts of discrimination can trigger systematic reform, noted United Nations Human Rights Commissioner Dr. Amara Akifar. Maya Chen's professional response created change that extends far beyond one airport gate. Maya's burned passport photo had become an international symbol of how dignity under pressure can transform injustice into lasting institutional reform. The ashes of her destroyed identity document had given birth to a revolution in civil rights enforcement that would protect countless future travelers from the discrimination she had endured. Federal authority had proved more powerful than discriminatory hatred, and it was all captured forever on video, ensuring that Beth Wilson's crime would prevent similar incidents across the aviation industry for generations to come. Present day. Maya's office. Federal Aviation Administration. Maya held the framed fragment of her burned passport photo. Half her face remained charred black, but her eyes, in the undamaged portion, reflected quiet determination that had transformed an entire industry. Her assistant knocked softly. Director Chen, the aviation executives are here for the annual Bias Prevention Summit. Maya nodded, placing the burned document back on her desk. That passport fragment had become the most powerful piece of evidence in federal civil rights enforcement history. The lasting legacy. Beth Wilson served 24 months in federal prison before being released to supervised probation. She now works at a community center teaching bias awareness workshops to service industry employees. Her federal conviction ensures she can never again work in customer service at transportation facilities. I destroyed more than a passport that day, Beth told a restorative justice panel. I destroyed my career, my freedom, and my family's financial security. But worst of all, I destroyed another human being's dignity on camera for the world to see. Maya's calm response to extreme humiliation had become standard training material in federal law enforcement academies. Her methodology, document evidence, preserve composure, use legitimate authority, was now taught to agents worldwide. Systemic transformation. The aviation industry had invested $520 million in bias prevention technology across 892 airports. Federal monitoring systems now process 2 million daily passenger interactions, flagging discriminatory behavior in real time. Discrimination complaints in transportation had decreased 88% since the passport burning incident. Airlines reported that bias elimination had actually improved efficiency when employees treated all passengers equally. Processing times decreased and customer satisfaction increased across all demographics. Sarah Carter had turned her accidental activism into a career. Now 21, she directed the National Student Documentation Network, training young people to safely record discrimination incidents for federal evidence. Maya showed us that staying calm and collecting evidence creates more change than emotional confrontation, Sarah explained to a high school assembly. My phone video helped convict a federal criminal and transform an entire industry. Professional vindication. Maya's federal investigation had expanded beyond aviation. Her techniques now applied to discrimination enforcement in healthcare, banking, retail, and government services. The Department of Justice had adopted her evidence collection protocols as standard federal procedure. Quiet authority achieves more than loud anger. Maya addressed the International Civil Rights Conference. Federal law provides powerful tools for addressing discrimination, but only when we use those tools strategically rather than emotionally. Her burned passport photo had appeared in United Nations human rights publications, demonstrating how individual dignity under pressure could trigger institutional reform. The deeper message, Maya's story proved that professional excellence and federal authority were more powerful than discriminatory hatred. Her methodical approach documenting evidence, preserving composure, leveraging legitimate power, had created systematic change affecting millions of travelers. The passport burning had backfired spectacularly on its perpetrator. Beth's attempt to humiliate Maya had instead elevated her to international prominence and triggered reforms that protected countless others from similar treatment. The transformation continues. 5 years later, discrimination incidents in American airports have plummeted to historic lows. Maya's burned passport photo hangs in the Department of Transportation's Hall of Justice, surrounded by testimonials from travelers who never experienced the humiliation she endured because of the systems she built. The legacy lives on. Every gate agent who treats passengers with equal dignity, every AI system that flags bias before it escalates, every federal monitor preventing discrimination, they all trace back to that moment when Beth Wilson struck a match and accidentally ignited a revolution in civil rights enforcement. Maya Chen proved that professional excellence under pressure creates lasting change. Her calm response to extreme hatred didn't just convict one discriminatory employee. It transformed an entire industry. The federal authority she wielded with such precision continues protecting millions of travelers who will never know her name but benefit from her courage. The burned passport became a symbol. Individual acts of discrimination can trigger systematic reform when met with strategic, documented resistance. Maya's methodical approach, preserving evidence, maintaining composure, leveraging legitimate power, remains the gold standard for civil rights enforcement worldwide. Standing in her office today, Maya often reflects on that morning at Gate A7. The ashes of her destroyed passport gave birth to something far more powerful than any single identity document. A comprehensive system ensuring that what happened to her can never happen to anyone else. The real victory wasn't Beth Wilson's conviction or the airline's compliance costs. It was the fundamental shift in how America's transportation system treats every passenger with the dignity Maya maintained even when her own identity was literally burning before her eyes. That transformation continues today, one interaction at a time, one prevented incident at a time, one protected traveler at a time. The ashes have become armor, and the humiliation has become hope for a more just America. Maya's burned passport taught the world that federal authority, when wielded with intelligence and restraint, can transform individual injustice into institutional change that protects everyone. The flame that was meant to destroy her identity instead lit the way to equality for millions. Justice, it turns out, burns brighter than hatred ever could.